Mm, All right, we'll get started as people file in. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Matt Schumann. I am a programming librarian here at Cary. Before we begin, please let me know if you're experiencing any technical issues. You can message me in the chat. However, if you have questions for our speaker tonight or you want to comment about your previous experience in Costa Rica, please use the Q&A button or the raise hand function. Oops, just lost it. Lastly, this program is made possible by the generous donors to the Cary Library Foundation. And with us this evening is Bill Gette, taking us on another virtual adventure. This is part 2 of the 2-part series on Costa Rica, which part 1 was last week. Bill is the former sanctuary director of the Joppa Flats Education Center in Newburyport and the past president of the Friends of Parker River National Wildlife Refuge. He's led expeditions across the world on all 7 continents. So now, please welcome Bill Gette.
Well, good evening, and thank you, Matt. Appreciate being with you this evening. And if you've heard my talks before, I always encourage folks to support the library. To me, the libraries are one of the most democratic, with a small d, small democratic, but most important of our community institutions. And if you can support them either by volunteering or by donating, that would be a good thing. Again, this is part 2 of a trip I did in November to Costa Rica. And the first presentation, which was the Pacific Lowlands, you can see that presentation. It will be up for 1 month on the Cary Library website for 1 month. So this is the second part. This is the Highlands. And it really broke this presentation into 2 parts because they are really so different. And I'd really encourage any of you who have questions about, well, thinking about going to Costa Rica or someplace in Middle America for, for nature observation, bird watching, whatever, that, hopefully this will give you some really good ideas as to places to go, what you could include in an itinerary when you're planning a trip. This trip I've been led 8 trips to Costa Rica for the Massachusetts Audubon Society. But this time I decided that I was going to go along, and I went with Rhodes Scholar. And they did a really good job, excellent job. But there are a lot of good tour companies that can take you to just wonderful places. Again, we'll see this as we go along. First of all, the Costa Rican flag. And I had this in my first presentation, but if you go to Costa Rica, you might hear them using the word tico or tica. Okay, so tico for a man and tica for a woman. It's a term that the Costa Ricans use affectionately for themselves, to themselves. They'll call each other a tico or a tica. And the term comes from the fact that Costa Ricans, part of their historic use of the language, would add the diminutive tico to the end of the words. It's just something that they did. And people from Panama and Costa Rica would notice this, and they start calling them ticos, and that's it. Something you'll see on signs everywhere, or hear people, pura vida, the pure life. And they use it for everything. It's an affectionate greeting, meaning great, fantastic, hello, how are you, nice to see you. So don't be surprised if you are met by somebody and say pura vida. Okay, that's perfectly acceptable, and it's very nice. And mucho gusto, I like this very much, and thank you, or nice to see you. So you might introduce yourself to somebody and they could say mucho gusto or whatever. It's just some terms that, if they're not unique to Costa Rica, it's certainly something that they use a lot. It's part of the endearment thing. So here's some faces, some natural faces of Costa Rica from the Central Highlands. And we'll be seeing these as we go through, but the presentation, the upper left is a Hotu. We'll be talking about that very unique creature in a while. And lessons, Motmot, and Volcano, Hummingbird. This is a bird that you'll only find at really high elevations, 8,000 feet or so. And then bottom left-hand corner is a Slaty Flowerpiercer. Notice the little bill, we'll talk about his way of making a living. Thick-billed Euphonia. And then in the bottom right-hand corner is the female yellow honeycreeper, which is actually a tanager, but it's called a honeycreeper. And that is the female. So if you have not been to Costa Rica or don't know much about it, that's where it's located. So it's between Nicaragua and Panama. And notice at this time, notice the isthmus there. Everyone talks about the Isthmus of Panama. Well, Costa Rica is also part of that isthmus. So it's in the narrowest part in Panama is about 60 miles across, and in Costa Rica about 100 miles across. So we're not talking about very big countries. And I think that's one of the real points. So the capital city is San Jose, and the airport, there's two major airports, Liberia up in the upper left-hand corner, and really dry area. A lot of expatriate US people live there. And then San Jose is a major, that's the capital of the country. And Alajuela, actually the airport is in Heredia, but right next to Alajuela. And that's a lot of people who travel in and do it overnight. Very often the tour companies and so forth will put you up in a hotel in Alajuela. It's a suburb of San Jose. Okay, size of the country. I think that's really important. In terms of acreage, square miles, it's the same size as West Virginia. So we're talking about not a particularly big country. It's one of my favorite places to travel to. It's just fantastic. So you just get a sense for how big that is. And that's going to be a theme of the presentation as we go through this. So again, last week I gave a presentation that was the Pacific Lowlands itinerary. And again, you can see that presentation on the Cary Library website. And tonight we're going to be doing the Central Highlands part of the itinerary, starting at Las Cruces Biological Station, going up into the Highlands, okay, and to Savegre Hotel Nature Reserve, one of my really favorite places. Well, both these are favorite, but I've been to Savegre several times and always enjoy it there. But the magnitude of the biodiversity in Costa Rica, it is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. Now, the reason it's not rated about the highest in terms of biodiversity is because it's such a tiny place. But if you want to compare bird species for North America, just think about this for a moment. The land area of North America, that's Canada, Alaska, 48 states, is 7,649,186 square miles. Big place. The land of Costa Rica is 19,370 square miles, again, size of West Virginia. So the land area of North America is 388 times larger than that of Costa Rica. So we're talking huge area, relatively tiny area. In terms of the coastline, and the coastline is really important for biodiversity because you have all that shoreline for different species. And in terms of birds, you get all these seabirds, migratory birds that are migrating along the coast. And think of the Aleutian Island chains in Alaska. Well, that reaches almost to Siberia, okay? And the northern parts of Canada, well, that's so close to Greenland. So it's just that huge coastline. So coastline, Costa Rica, only 763 miles. So the North American coastline is 214 times longer than that of Costa Rica. So I just make these comparisons to show huge area, huge coastline versus relative tiny area and tiny coastline. But when you look at the number of bird species that are seen, the number of bird species that have been identified, these include some extinct species and some species that have only been seen, well, certainly less than 5 times, is about 900. And new ones are being added every once in a while, but about 900. So from the Mexican-US border to the North Pole, okay, we have 900 species in North America. In Costa Rica, in that tiny little area, they've recorded 877 at least, and they keep adding to those. So why? Why does Costa Rica have such an incredible variety of bird life? There's a number of things. I pointed out the isthmus between North and South America. Well, for a lot of land birds, that is think of it as a funnel or a hose. I mean, so you have, if you think North America, which is 3,000 miles across, and you get to Costa Rica, which is 100 miles across, there are a lot of birds that are migrating from North America towards South America that are being funneled down through this relatively small area, through this very, very small amount of land. So that isthmus plays an important role for sure. The other thing is the diversity of habitats based on elevation. And what you'll be seeing when I show you some maps of the elevation, that it goes from sea level to 12,530 feet. So every 1,000 feet or so that you go up in elevation, the habitat changes, the vegetation changes, the food resources change. So different groups of birds are at different elevations. That's certainly a reason. Then there's habitat based on climatic conditions, things like the prevailing wind and the amount of rainfall. I'll show you a chart about how much rainfall there is. And then they have their permanent residents, those that don't migrate, they're there all year round. They have the migrants, those are the birds that from North America coming down and overwinter in Costa Rica and Panama and those areas. And then you have the passage migrants. Those are the ones that are moving out of North America through Mexico, through Central America, into South America. They don't overwinter in Costa Rica. So they move through there in the fall. And then during the spring migration, they move back through Costa Rica going on. So there's all these things, the restrictions of the isthmus, the habitat, diversity of habitats based on elevation, the climatic conditions, and the types of birds. So here are the Central Highlands. And you can see I've circled them. Notice these Central Highlands go down into Panama. So if you've been to Panama, to Western Panama in a place called David, spelled David, the mountains go down there. So those are the central. And if you notice that, 3,000 feet is 9,843 feet. Notice how much of the country is that really high elevation. So those mountains, in another way, sort of form a boundary, a wall, if you wish, between species of birds that are on the Caribbean slope, in other words, east and northeast of the mountains, and those on the Pacific slope. So certainly elevation, and I'm going to be taking you to 10,000 feet. Okay, and then the average rainfall. Now, keep in mind that the average rainfall or precipitation, they don't get snow in Costa Rica, so they do it in inches of rainfall, but the precipitation in Massachusetts, it's about 40 inches a year. But if you look at the map here, notice around my number 2, right in the middle of the map, notice that's Cartago, that I mentioned briefly before. And notice that dark blue. They're getting over 200 inches of rainfall because the prevailing winds are coming from the Caribbean. They come across the Caribbean slope, Caribbean lowlands. They then hit the mountains and go up. As they go up, those winds that are laden with moisture cool, and that water then precipitates out, and it's either in the case of fog or rain, and often torrential rain. And I'll be taking you down to the southernmost part of the country, where I marked it with number 1. That's the Las Cruces area. Notice there's a huge amount of rain. So every day you get rain. Okay, so if you go on a trip like this, you got to make sure you have a poncho, you have a way to protect your camera supplies and optics, but just huge amounts of rainfall. Okay. Now, in terms of temperature, this has a big impact on the vegetation and the wildlife that can be there. So if you notice that number 2, again, that's up Las Cruces, the highest elevations in the Talamanca Mountains, right there. Notice that the temperatures can be down to 45 to 50. Those are average temperatures. I went a trip about 12 years ago to Costa Rica, and quite honestly was not prepared well enough. And here I am at high elevation in a short sleeve shirt, and the rain came and the fog, and I was incredibly cold, okay, up there. So anyway, so just give you a sense for the elevation, the amount of rainfall. All these have a major impact on the vegetation and therefore the plants and animals that live there. Okay, so we're going to start our tour. This is coming right from the southernmost part of Costa Rica. So basically, the Las Cruces biological station, which is right here, is about 5 miles from the Panamanian border. Very, very, very close. Okay. So in the first section of the presentation that you again could see about the Pacific lowlands, we had been at Esquinas Lodge, and from there we are following along the highway. This is the Pan American Highway, so the highway that starts in Canada, goes all the way through Panama, and except for a break in the Darien Gap in Panama, goes into South America. And then from elevation about where we left the Pan American Highway at just about 300 feet above sea level, we then notice the road with all the switchbacks. We're going up high, and we're going up to the elevation of 3,280 feet. So the highest elevation we'd been to this was about the same elevation when we were in the Central Highlands, which is Alajuela and San Jose is at about 3,000 feet. So this is the area we're going, and as we're driving up the road, we stop along the road. This is a termite colony. They also make colonies in the ground, but these are the ones that they're made of wood, chopped up wood and fecal material that they make these colonies, these homes for themselves. And notice the tunnels that they make so that they can move around between getting wood and things like that from the ground area, and they can move throughout the tree within these tunnels so that predators can't get to them. A lot of these termite colonies that you see after a while become abandoned, and they're really, it looks really solid, but it's sort of like styrofoam, if you want to think of it that way. And so a lot of, when they're abandoned, the termites abandon it, then woodpeckers and parrots and things of that nature will make a hole in there, and they will make their nests within these colonies. Interesting. And then a feature throughout the New World tropics is the leafcutter ants. And so this is the leafcutter ants have been up here. This is a palm, and they've been cutting chunks out of the leaf to carry it back to their colony. And so here are some workers. I mean, for them, it's like they're sort of carrying like a 4x8 sheet of plywood over the head. I mean, it's sort of in the equivalent stage, and they carry it back into their colonies, where they then go a type of bacteria that produces some threads that the ants will eat. So they're actually farming underground. They're bringing in this plant material as nutrients for the bacteria that they're growing. Find that? Find those? Now this is army ants. I've been in a situation in army ants. They're like this. I remember being in Belize one time, and I got woken up in the middle of the night because there's this swarm. And when we talk about swarms, it can be more than 1 million of these ants will come in a parade, okay, right through your house, right through the room I was staying in. And they just go all through the room, and they're looking for any kind of insects, whatever is in there, moths, other flies, anything that cockroaches, whatever is in there. And so a lot of people, if they in their homes, if they see a group of army ants, they're not disturbed at all. They just come into the house. So just walk out of the house and come back in a couple hours, and it'll be all cleaned of any insect pests that you might have. So here's the army ant swarm. Okay, so and they have, I think it looked like a cricket or a katydid, something like this, but obviously they're swarming all over it. And what they're doing is they're basically butchering it. Okay, and they'll then carry this back to the central core of the army ants as food, and off goes the leg. So we were just watching this right along the side of the road. It's fascinating. At least I think it's fascinating. Okay. Now, Costa Rica grows a very good coffee, and if I were to give you a lecture on shade-grown coffee, I think that would be really important to think about. If you have an option of buying shade-grown coffee, it's going to cost you a little bit more. But when they grow a lot of their plantations in Costa Rica and also in Panama, what they do, instead of clear cutting an area and then growing coffee plants, what they do is they'll selectively take out the larger trees and then plant their coffee bushes, coffee trees underneath the canopy of the standing trees. And what this does, they say the coffees taste better, but from a conservation perspective, it's really important because those big trees that are overhanging the coffee plantation, instead of being all cut down, that's where our warblers and our orioles and our grosbeaks, that's where they're wintering. So if you can think about that, it's really good conservation to do that. By the way, the redder the berries, the riper they get. And sometimes they'll pay a premium to coffee pickers to pick only the darkest red ones. Okay, so we've now arrived at 3,900 feet, and this is Las Cruces Biological Station and also Wilson Garden. It's a famous garden, and this is the view that we're seeing down. This is now looking down onto the Caribbean side of the country. Beautiful area. Beautiful, beautiful forests that are just covering these mountainsides with the palms in the foreground. And this is the type of lodging that they have. It's really nice. A full shower, bathroom, everything, just like you'd be going into a nice hotel. It's a little bit remote. It's not 5-star, but hey, all I care about is hot water, clean sheets, and I'm happy as can be. And these are spectacular compared to that. So just get a sense for the rooms that you would stay in. Okay. And this to me, I think about this as being one of the most beautiful birds I've ever seen. They have lots and lots of different tanagers here at this place. They have a little feeding station where you can put out bananas or watermelon and things of that nature. And within minutes after you put some fresh food out there, they're there. This is speckled tanager, and it's just I look at these feathers on the throat and the breast. Notice how the feather is black. Almost the entire center of it is black, but it's a white fringe around the outside, and that gold, and the black spot between the eye and the bill. That's called the lores, L-O-R-E-S. That area. A lot of birds have coloration there. So this is compared to our tanagers, these are a little bit smaller than you would think of a scarlet tanager, for example, but just a beautiful, beautiful bird. Okay. Although this one's pretty good too. This is silver-throated tanager. In this case, it's coming in at one of these feeding stations to eat watermelon. So as we were making our way up that steep hill, up the mountainside, we stopped at a little fruit stand, and we bought bananas and watermelons and that we could put on this feeding station. So really beautiful bird. This one's not particularly as colorful as that, but this is another really beautiful one. You can see the structuring of the feathers. This is palm tanager. I'm not sure it has any special relationship to palm trees, but that's the name of it. Okay. And this is a honeycreeper, which is a type of tanager, but this is the green honeycreeper, and this is the male. I just there's that come over the back on the nape of back of the head, and it's like he's wearing a shawl or something of those these really feathery feathers, really beautiful. And as they get mature, the eye gets really dark red, like you see it. And the bill, they use that bill for, well, they come to the feeding stations to eat bananas and watermelons, but they use that beak to also probe into flowers to get nectar and pollen. And there's the female. We've seen her before, but this is a fully adult female with that bright mahogany colored eye. Okay. And this is saltator. In some places they call them saltators, but I think the generally accepted name most places is saltator. This is buff. So if you think of this, it's a little skinnier, but it's basically the size of a blue jay, a little bit smaller. But they love to come in and feed on fruit, and you can see the gray face, the black stripe, and then that buffy color on the throat. Okay. And this is the second. There are only 2 saltators on the Pacific side. This is the second one. Not as colorful, but this is streaked saltator. with the streaks that you see on the breast. This is a euphonia. Okay, so a lot of bird species in the New World tropics, they use the genus name, which is euphonia, and they just put a title in front of it, a modifier. Right? In this case, thick-billed euphonia, and this is the female. Now, quite honestly, her bill is not very much thicker than any other euphonia, but it seems a name that seems to work. That's the female. She's more cryptically colored, so she can, incubate her eggs in relative safety and take care of her young ones. And this is the male. Now, this bird both has pigment, and it also has the structures of the feathers that reflect certain wavelengths of light. So that as this bird turns, it can be almost black, very dark blue to black. And then you get it in just the perfect light, you get an image that looks like this with this really brilliant blue color. Euphonias. Okay. Now, a group of flycatchers called Elanias. We get one species of Elania in the southwestern part of the United States, but this is a lesser Elania, say size, basically the size of a little bit smaller than a phoebe, if you're familiar with a phoebe, body size, probably the size of a tufted titmouse. But they always have those little crests that you see here, like you would have on a cedar waxwing or on a cardinal. They're flycatchers. These are obligate flycatchers. Okay. And then we have a lot of these birds that have this greenish back and yellow breasts and chests. Okay, and so this is gray-capped flycatcher. Flycatchers tend to be very alert and very active. Usually, most cases, relatively easy to see because they're usually out on vegetation where they can fly out and catch insects. Now, there are some flycatchers, of course, that are under the forest canopies where they're very difficult to see, but a lot of them are out in the open, like this one is. Another beautiful one, this is golden hooded tanager. It's just like the black on the face, the gold on the head. And notice, I mean, why does it need that beautiful blue right underneath the eye? But it's a good thing. Good thing it's a golden hooded tanager. Now, this is one of the birds that is a North American bird. This is summer tanager. Now, we get summer tanagers in New England occasionally. I mean, every year we get at least a couple. They're really quite common as far north as southern New Jersey, for example, and really common in the southeastern part of the United States. But this bird seems to have somewhat of an attitude here. But this is a male. Now, this is a male that's at least a couple years old. I was there in November, so I know for certain that this bird was not hatched in 2023 when I was there. Okay, it was at least the year before. Okay, this is the male, and then this is also a male. But this is we refer to as a hatching year bird. So when I saw it in November, I know that this bird was hatched sometime prior to November, probably in the southern part of the United States, maybe in April, and further north in its range, probably in May or early June, and has now migrated and is overwintering in Costa Rica. And that's why those shade-grown coffee and those type of things are important for what we think of as our tanagers. No, they're not our tanagers. Okay, we get the tanagers like, so we typically arrive in New England in maybe the 1st in May, and by the end of August, they were gone. Okay, so we only have them for a few months, a couple, maybe 4 months, but they spend most of their time either migrating or in their wintering grounds. So now, I took this photograph in November, so I was in the year it was hatched. Now, right now, if I took this photograph, I would call this a second year bird. In other words, it's second year of life. Okay. One of the coolest birds is the mott-mott. Okay. This used to be called blue-crowned mott-mott. They changed the name to Lessons mott-motts. Okay. A beautiful, beautiful eye. You can see, excuse me, excuse me. But you can see some of the iridescence on this bird. And they're usually, when you see them, they're very easy to see. because they will tend to sit on one perch for long periods of time, and they'll just sit there, and where I could get some pretty good photographs. Now you could call this an aracari, or you could call it an aracari. I've heard both terms throughout Middle America for this bird. This is a relative of the toucan. What a gorgeous bird is coming in here, and it's eating some fruit. Now, that bill is used for eating fruit, nuts off palm trees and things of that nature. But then also longbill is used for probing into nesting cavities of birds, because they'll eat bird eggs, they'll eat the younger birds. So they can stab that bill into nest in order to reach the young or eggs inside. I think this is a really handsome bird with that distinctly red rump. Aracari or aracari, okay? Now this is a mannequin. Okay, this is the female. Unfortunately, this is orange colored mannequin. Okay, she doesn't have an orange crown, only the male does. But this is a type of bird that have interesting breeding system in that males form a lek, that's spelled L-E-K. And they take a small part of vegetation, and on the ground, they'll take all the leaves away. And they'll clean it up so it's absolutely bare ground, and they'll clean up the area like that. And then they'll start displaying, and they'll display and they'll sing, and very often the songs are bzzz, and then they snap their wings, so it sounds like you're snapping your fingers. Okay, and the females come in the breeding time to copulate, and then they fly away, and they never see the males again. Males have no help at all to them. But this is a mannequin. So from the Las Cruces and from the garden, we took a drive uphill and get beautiful, nice dirt roads. And if you've ever had papaya, very good. This is where they come from. And so this is a yellow-headed caracara. We do not get these in North America. It's basically, I think they get them in, well, they certainly get them in Belize and southern Mexico. This is an immature one. I could never figure out quite what it was eating that was in the road here, but it was something that had been well squished. And anyway, so this is the immature bird, and this is the adult. So that's where yellow-headed caracara. They are scavengers. Okay, so you'll see them, but they'll also walk through the fields and eating insects and lizards and things like that. But no dead animal. They'll never pass up a dead animal. So, okay. These are Oripendula, okay, crested Oripendula, and they make these nests that look like this. Okay, so the opening, if you look at the rightmost part of the image here and count the second nest in, you can see the opening at the top. So the females are the one that basically knit these nests. They tie different knots with the grass that they bring up, and they knit these things together. And the entrance again is way up at the very top, and you go back. One of the ways, hopefully, to keep the young and the eggs away from predators. And there is some safety in numbers, and these nests are not particularly long. There's only about 2.5 feet, the longest one, from top to bottom. But some species of Oripendula can have, the nest can be up to 4 feet long, knitted like this. Okay. Now this is a bird that's halfway between a kingfisher and a hummingbird. This is a jacamar. Happens to be rufous-tailed jacamar. The body of this thing is maybe a little bit bigger than, well, not size of a robin, but maybe a little bit bigger than a tufted titmouse, with that bill that sort of looks like a kingfisher bill, and the plumage looks like that of a hummingbird, very iridescent plumage that you see here. And it specializes on butterflies. So sometimes if you'll find where their nest site is, you'll find on the ground around it, you'll find all these wings of butterflies. They eat a lot of insects. Butterflies is a treat for them. Okay, and we have this is an Impidnax flycatcher. These are tiny little flycatchers that we get up in New England in the summertime, we basically have 5 species that get up into New England. And this is an Impinax, same genus as the other one, but it's restricted to Middle America. This is a tiny little flycatcher. The body is not much bigger than that of a chickadee, maybe slightly bigger. But this is one of those, I was talking about flycatchers before being pretty much out in the open where you can see them. This is one that's very often inside the canopy of the trees where they're more difficult to see. I was not expecting to see this. This is a black-chested jay. They're much more common on the Pacific slope, but here we are. We're up in the just outside of Las Cruces, and we have this black-chested jay. And the funny thing is, it came down and landed on our telescope. Okay, and I missed the shot, unfortunately. But at one point, this jay was actually looking into the lens of the telescope. But just notice the coloration on this. It has that beautiful white breast, the black on the throat, upper part of the chest, and then some iridescent blue that you can see on the face, 3 patches of it on the face. Bigger than our blue jay. Yeah. And I was talking about some of the migrants that would come down into Costa Rica. This is a chestnut-sided warbler. This is the one that nests here throughout New England, usually along forest edges, power line cuts, things of that nature. Fields that have been revegetated with the shrubs and things like that. So this is chestnut-sided warbler, smaller than a chickadee. Now this is magnolia warbler, breeds in New England, overwintering here in Costa Rica. That's why, again, this Costa Rica, all the conservation land they have in Costa Rica is so important for what we think of as our birds. Okay. And then we went to this organic farm. We made a little trip out here just to take a walk around. And bromeliads. This is just what a beautiful bromeliad. Okay, just the coloration in order to attract pollinators and things like that. Some of the leaves actually turn color. And these bromeliads are really important for insects and for frogs. A lot of female frogs will lay their eggs inside the water that's trapped within these bromeliads. And so if you look in carefully in those, sometimes you can find the little tadpoles of the tiny tree frogs. It's just pretty. So this is the bird that we went to this garden for in particular. This is common potu. Okay. There's another species that looks identical to this. You can't tell them apart except by the range, which is northern potu. And this is what this bird does all day. It finds a stump or branch, something like that, and it just sits there all day because it's a nocturnal hunter. Okay. And so it doesn't look like it has much of a mouth, but you see the tiny little beak way at the very top? It has a gigantic mouth when it opens it. And so here's a better look at this. So this is a bird that uses the ambient light at nighttime. So if there's no moon and just the stars, that's the light it uses. And it typically sits on a perch and it watches for flying beetles or moths, and then it will jump up and fly up and catch it and very often come right back to the same spot it was. So this is a common potu. And this is what, if you go out at nighttime, if you go on a tour company and somebody will take you out on they call them game rides at nighttime, this is what a potu looks like at nighttime. So they'll take a big flashlight and they'll scan it either up into the trees or across the field, looking for this eye shine, because that's what you're seeing here is these birds have a tapetum lucidum. It's Latin, tapetum lucidum, which is a layer of cells behind the retina. So what happens as the light comes in through the pupil, hits the retina, the light continues behind, hits this like a mirror of cells, and sends light back through the retina again. So what this bird is seeing the light at least twice. So that's why it can, even in very, very low light conditions, can see quite well. So tapetum lucidum. Hey, this is pelican flower or Dutchman's pipe. huge thing. So this was about almost 24 inches across, and you don't want to smell them because they smell foul. They smell like rotten meat, dead meat, okay? Decaying stuff. Well, that's fine. I mean, a lot of insects, that's exactly what they're looking for. They're looking for dead stuff. And so they can lay their eggs on like flies, all kinds of different insects. And so that they're being pollinated by carrion flies and things like that. But really big. So then from the Las Cruces, which was right near San Vito, we're then going to go up along the central spine of mountains, the Talamanca Mountains. Okay. And here's another one of our migrants. This is a eastern wood pewee. Peewees, our peewees have a call that's pia, pia-wee, pia-wee. That's how they get their name. This happens to be an eastern wood pewee. And they're not singing at this time of year, so you have to use other characteristics, such as the color of the lower mandible of the bill to tell which one this is. And this is eastern wood pewee. And then we're going up to 10,800 feet because we want to check out some special habitats up here and birds. So this is native bamboo that you're seeing on the right-hand side of the image. So much of the bamboo throughout the New World tropics comes from Asia, but this is native, and we're in a cloud forest now. We're 10,000 feet. So again, that wind that's being driven from the Caribbean across the Caribbean's lowlands up into the mountains, it cools off, and the moisture in that precipitates out in fog or rain. And we had both rain and fog in the time that we were here for just an hour or so. And then the next minute it clears like this. So some of the plants, this is Costa Rican St. John's wort. Okay. Fairly big plant. The blossoms look very, very similar to the St. John's wort that we have in New England. And this is one of our prime target birds here, was the Volcano Junco. They only live at really high elevations. Yeah. So it took us quite a bit of time to actually find it. Okay, from there, so from 10,000 feet, we're going to go down a little ways to 7,218 to Savegre Hotel, which is, for me, a really special place. And the lodge is at 7,218 feet. And this is first-class stuff. This is really, it's a spa. You could go there for several days and just relax, or good. This is the type of accommodation you have. Really nice restaurant, good food. And they have a big trail system that you can do lots and lots of hiking. Lots of plantings. This is angel's trumpets. You'll see that throughout Central America. About 18 inches long from the top of the flower to the end of the blossom. Just beautiful flowers throughout the gardens. They do a really nice job with them. This is what the mountain looks like when it's not raining or not foggy. So these are what they're growing right now here. These are fruit trees. So apples and pears and things of that nature, which you could not grow at lower elevations, but up here it's nice and cool. Okay, this is the Savegre River that comes through the area. Okay. Just really nice to see it. And this is one of the really special birds of this area. This is a Torrent Tyrannulet. The only tyrant, there's a lot of tyrant flycatchers, and they're usually the bigger flycatchers. Well, a tyrannulet means it's a tiny tyrant. So, and this is a torrent. They're only around fast-moving mountain streams. That's it. And that's what they look like. You can see the river in the background and this size of a chickadee. It's a flycatcher. Okay. And here, Savegre, they specialize in hummingbird feeders. You could just sit on a bench. You could spend hours just photographing. This is lesser violet ear. I think that's a pretty good name for this one. Coming in for nectar. This is the male. It's been immature male. But notice in this one how it's raised up the feathers over the ear in display. So it's displaying for a female. Look at all the feathers on the head, all those tiny, tiny feathers. And this is only at high elevations, you get this white-throated mountain gem. This happens to be the male. Really beautiful, where the violet ear has a slightly down-curved or decurved bill. This is a straight bill. But notice the blue on the head and the iridescent green over the eye. So that's the male. And there's the female. She has that buffy colored throat. And talk about how the light changes the coloration. So here is, this used to be called Magnificent Hummingbird. It's changed to Talamanca Hummingbird. But notice this bird looking at in one direction, and then when it turns around, okay? So this just shows you that this is not pigments you're seeing, but the structures of the feathers, the melanin within the structure of the feathers are reflecting certain wavelengths when you see them in the correct light. Okay. Little sparrow, I've seen these throughout. I've seen these all the way down to southern Argentina. This is rufous collared sparrow. And so I don't want anybody saying that sparrows aren't really beautiful. This is about as beautiful a bird as you can get, coming up and eating watermelon. This is Slaty Flowerpiercer. I showed you one of these before, but notice that distinctive shaped bill. And it has it sort of cheats, or maybe it really does cheat, where most of the hummingbirds and most of the other birds come in through the blossom and work their way up into the blossom and then get down to the nectar and the pollen that's deep within the flower. Well, that way they get some of this pollen on their feathers. So when they visit another plant, they then transfer the pollen from one flower to the next one. Well, these flower piercers, and there's some others, they cheat. Instead of going in through the blossom, they just peck at the base of the flower, like this is a little female, okay? With a little, and what she was doing was she was working on the base of this flower to get at the nectar that's inside the flower without going in through the flower, but just pecking on the outside. So she's getting her nectar and the pollen sort of, but not doing what she's supposed to do in terms of pollination, but just how different species of birds react to things. Here she is. Now, when I took this photograph, she was about 1.5 feet away from me, okay, right coming to those feeders. This is a wood wren. This is a tiny, smaller than our, well, about the same size of our house wren, smaller than a Carolina wren that you only see in the mountainsides. So that again, these are bush tanagers. Okay, this is a handsome bird. So this is about the size, a little smaller than a cardinal. So just have a sense for what and sometimes when they'll come to the feeder, you might have 10 or 12 of them all piled onto one feeder. We have mockingbirds, of course, northern mockingbird here in New England. This is tropical mockingbird, which is fairly common throughout most of Central America. Not in deep woodlands or anything like that, but around fields and things of that nature. Now, this is Tennessee warbler. This is one of those birds. I have presentations on wood warblers. I just have not been able to photograph this in New England, but here it is in Costa Rica. This is a bird that nests in northern Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador, so not very much at all in northern New England. Further north, smaller than a chickadee. And so we did what they'll do here at Savegre. They will take you up in four-wheel drive vehicles up the really steep hill to an observation platform. So if you're part of a tour or something like that, because it's really fun to do that, and it's taking a long time to walk up there, but four-wheel drive. And that's what you get. You get this beautiful view of the mountainside, the hillsides here. And I decided that I've been to Costa Rica many times, but I never had time for photograph, because if you're leading a trip, it's very difficult to do a leadership role and take photographs at the same time. So I decided rather than going up higher, I walked down along the road we came up on. And that's where I found, this is ruddy wood creeper. Think of it sort of like a woodpecker or like a brown creeper, if you're familiar with those. Okay. Now, acorn woodpeckers, we get acorn woodpeckers well up into the United States, certainly commonly in places like New Mexico and Arizona. And it's one of the most beautiful of our woodpeckers. And you might notice here, it has two toes that you can see that are forward and the other one that's back is not shown. So it's 2 toes forward, 2 toes back. And what they do is they collect acorns and they find an old tree or a telephone pole, and they make holes in the tree or telephone pole, and that's where they store their acorns so that they will have food supply in those years where there is not a good acorn crop. Called a cache, C-A-C-H-E. Other woodpecker, this is lineated woodpecker. If you're familiar with our pileated or pileated woodpecker, that's about the same size as this bird. And we, of course, went in hopes of seeing quetzals. And this is the female Resplendent Quetzal. And they were coming to feed on avocados. Okay. Oh, sorry. So the male was not behaving at all. Okay, he was back in the vegetation where it was very, very hard to see, but I did get some images of it. And if you can look at this image, so the end of the tail is almost at the end of my photograph, and the head is just behind. You might see some fruit that is green with a little red top to it. His head is just to the right of it. So extraordinarily long tail. And what they eat is wild avocados. And they don't sit on a branch and grab the avocado. They fly up to the branch and grab the avocado and then fly to eat it. Those are the wild avocados. And so ending up our trip, we're going up almost 9,000 feet now to a lodge where we had dinner. And this was our last stop before going back to San Jose. But there were some beautiful views here, looking over the landscape, and talk about bromeliads. Just this tree is just absolutely covered with. Now, these bromeliads are not parasitic. They're getting all their nutrients from the rainwater and the wind, but they can be quite detrimental to trees like that because they get really heavy. And as I showed you before, these bromeliads can collect a lot of water in them, so they become really heavy. So they can overburden the branches and break the branches of the tree. So this is a long-tailed silky flycatcher. This is a bird that we saw a couple other places, but this was by far the best image. And so the body size is about that size of a cardinal, but with the longer tail, with that beautiful, beautiful crest. And I think the yellow eye ring really makes it special. And then finishing up here with the volcano hummingbird, we think of most hummingbirds being in tropical warm areas, but here it is, almost 9,000 feet, and here is this volcano hummingbird. And this is the only places that you can see it in the highest elevations of Costa Rica and westernmost parts of Panama. And this is those feathers on the front, the gorget, just lifting it up because he's displaying a little bit. So that's the end of the presentation today. And if you have been to Costa Rica and would like to share some of your experiences, or if you have questions, I'd like to try to answer them. Matt?
Yeah, thank you so much, Bill. Incredible photos, especially that last one with the hummingbird. I used that in the promotional image I made. It's just such an incredible creature and photograph. Just as a reminder to everyone, please send your questions via the Q&A if you have any, or you can use the raise hand function. Looks like we have two that came in. One is, when is the best time to travel to Costa Rica? Is there a season when there is less rain?
Well, I guess if you went in midsummer, it's probably less rainy then than other time. But one thing about the rain, it will very often rain off and on, and maybe rain for an hour and a half, and then not rain anymore. So I would consider more, if you've never been to Costa Rica, I would not think so much about the rain as an issue as to when could you go and see the most, get the greatest variety. I think that would be my first decision point, not the amount of rain. And so if you go like I did in November, or January, February, March, you get an incredible variety of birds down there. If you're not particularly interested in North American birds, the ones that breed here and overwinter or migrate through Costa Rica, then July is fine. I mean, you can just, I would say go. It doesn't matter when you go, just go.
Yeah. Another question that came in is they said, thanks for this, Bill. For new birders, what binoculars and what starting telescope would you recommend? Thanks a lot.
Okay, that's a very good. I do have a program that I sometimes give for the library is an introduction to bird watching, and we cover that. But this is good. Okay, you can spend lots and lots of money on binoculars. You can spend $15, $16, $1,700 if you want to, but you don't have to. You can get a perfectly good pair of binoculars for $400 or $500, even maybe less than that. But I wouldn't go too much less than that. But I think what you want to do, binoculars come with markings 7x35 or 8x42. Okay, I would not recommend that you get anything less than a 7 and nothing less than, say, 32. Because if you get something like 820 or something, it's good magnification, but you can never find anything. Okay, so the first number, the 7 or the 8 or the 10, means how many times does that magnify what you're seeing? The 35 or 45 or whatever indicates the width of the objective lens, the lens that's the farthest away from your face. So the more no, you don't want 1095, you never carry them, okay? But if you have something like 842, 735, something like that, you'll get a really good amount of magnification. And if you and then you want at least 32 in terms of the width so that you can find things easily. Okay. So, and the other thing is buying binoculars is like buying shoes. If they don't like, you want your shoes to fit your feet, if the binoculars don't fit your hand comfortably, then try another pair. Okay. Because you're going to be wearing, make sure you have a good strap around your neck, those type of things. Make sure you clean them. Okay. But lens cleaning thing. In terms of a telescope, telescopes can be really quite expensive. And if you're going to look into a telescope, sometimes some of the birdwatcher supply stores can have used binoculars and telescopes that you can consider buying. But if you're going to invest money in a telescope, make sure that you get a good tripod. You don't want $1,000, $1,200 telescope on a $49.95 tripod. It's going to be nothing but trouble for you. So that's it. And most birders, you get telescopes that have a range like 20 to 60. Well, I've been birding since 1961, and I think I've used something over 35 like 12 times or something. Okay, so you don't need all that magnification. If the bird is that far away, or what mammal or whatever you're looking for is that far away, you're probably going to get so much heat shimmer, and it just isn't going to work. So if you have a telescope that's 20 to say 35, that's really good. That's you're going to be using 20 or 25 99% of the time. I hope that's helpful. But if you're going to buy a telescope, make sure you buy a good tripod.
Thank you. One more question came in. Maybe that can be the last one for the night. Oh, somebody has their hand raised, so if you have time for two.
Fine, it's fine. Thanks, Matt.
Okay. This question is, somebody uses Merlin to identify their hummingbird photographs. Still, they're not 100% sure of the identification. Do you have any better suggestions? Thank you.
Well, I mean, hummingbirds you would think if you look at the field guides, hummingbirds can be a piece of cake, but they're not. They're very, very difficult, because if you're not getting them in the correct light, the image of the gorget, of the throat in the book may look red, but your image it's gray. So the hummingbirds are notoriously difficult, and because you have immature ones and you have females, so they can be, typically Merlin works pretty well most of the time. So, I think you just have to work on the field guide best you can. But if you are having difficulty with the hummingbirds, I fully understand.
Yeah. And then John Reddick, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can, John. How are you?
Fine. So, I talked a little bit last time about our trip to Costa Rica going on 25 years ago. We also went to Savegre Lodge back then. It is a wonderful place. I recommend it. Although it looks like they've upgraded it a bit since we were there. But
you can't believe, John, how it's been upgraded.
oh yeah,
Besides being a wonderful place to see wildlife and do photography and like that, it's also a fancy spa. So
it is. Yeah. That's a little different than when we were there.
oh, for sure. Yeah.
I guess the two or three things I recall from the trip, certainly the Quetzal, we got to see the Quetzal one day, but unfortunately I didn't have my better camera with me, so I didn't get any decent pictures, but we did get to see it. And certainly the hummingbirds, like you said, I'll just second that. It's an amazing place for that without even leaving the lodge, the feeders at the lodge. I mean, what comes in there is incredible. I will. Another interesting thing we did there. Our guide, a really nice guide we had. He took us to his daughter's um, elementary school, and we spent a few minutes at their school, and it was really nice. And he pointed out to us that Costa Rica kind of has directed the money they don't spend on an army towards two things. One is conservation, and the other is education. So it's a country that I think has its head on really straight. I also would just say to anyone who's planning to go, make sure you get your hands on the bird book for the local birds. The Birds of Costa Rica edition we bought when we went was really good. It's 25 years later. There's much better, but also with apps like Merlin, make sure you download whatever you can, and maybe it's not even Merlin, but apps that give you the local birds for the time you're going.
Very cool.
Yep. Okay. That's good, John. And John, and the idea is before you go, is really a good idea to at least understand what the bird families are. In other
Right.
words, what is a motmot? What is a trogon? What is a toucan? What's a euphonia? And then also look at your field guide and notice and understand where are you going, because the birds on the Caribbean slope can be very, very different from those on the Pacific slope. So study the ones where you're going to be. Okay.
One more question. Are you planning to lead any trips again to Costa Rica? I know you didn't lead this one, but
No, I did 54 international trips and 135 domestic. So I think I've done enough.
you're done. Okay.
Yeah, put a fork in me. I'm done.
Well, thank you, John, for your comments and questions. And then, all right, maybe that was an exit, but all right. Well, otherwise, thank you everyone for coming tonight and asking questions. And Bill, thank you so much for sharing your recent travel, all the photos from it. It's truly amazing.
Well, Matt, it's always a great pleasure to work with you, and look forward to seeing you for some wildflower programs later on.
Yes, those will be on the library website soon. So keep an eye out. But thank you, everyone, and thank you, Bill.
Well, good evening, everyone.